Hey everybody, it's Belinda. If you're not comfortable about the duties of a position, how do you address them? So there's two ways I can go with that question. So for the first one, if you're not comfortable about the duties of a position, how do you address them? If it's at the interview, then you can talk about those questions. You can talk about those duties. So you can talk about them and see what they think. But at the interview, you have no pull or muscle. You have no weight. I mean, you're not even hired. So if you're not comfortable with the position, they'll just go with the duties. They'll just go with the next person who may be more comfortable with the duties. But if you have been working there a while, and again, you have that relationship with your supervisor, what's the counter? The field that I work in, we talk to employers a lot about accommodations. Such and such can't do this. Such and such can't do that. Right? And the employer's listening. What you balance it out with is, instead of taking the trash out, can I do this instead? Because instead of taking away all the stuff that you don't like to do or can't do, what are you replacing it with? Because to taking some of that off and I have to give it to somebody else, then I'm not going to keep paying you for those duties, because now some of your duties I have to give to somebody else. So if you want to change your duties or you're not comfortable with those duties, then think of some duties that you can do to replace it. Because if you can't replace it, and it has to be equal value in the employer's mind of replacement. So I'll give a really good example. If the position calls for you sales, and for you to go out and cold call, or you go out and cold call or knock on doors trying to sell a vacuum cleaner, and you're like, I'm not comfortable on knocking on doors selling a vacuum cleaner. Well, then what's your counter? Because there has to be a counter. What are you going to do to sell these vacuum cleaners instead? How are you going to sell these vacuum cleaners? Because this is our method. So what are you going to do? Not sell vacuum cleaners? So you want to think of something that the employer is going to say, okay, well, instead of doing this duties, you can do this instead, which has to equal or be valued more than what you're trying to give up. How can I talk about what work-related tasks stress me out in an interview? So that's a good question. And I almost want to say, for the answer is you don't. But I'm not going to say that here, even though that's my first reaction is, no, you don't want to say that. So how can I talk about what work-related tasks stress me out in an interview? Before you talk about what you can't do, what stresses you out, anything like that, hear the whole description. Hear what exactly you're going to be doing. A lot of times we go in, and already be like, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And they may not even ask you to do that. And you're already going in saying what you can do and what stresses you out. That's not the best look that you want for an interview. So first, make sure that you hear all what the job duties are before you say anything, before you say this stresses me out. If it's a duty that will stress you out, hear it through. Think about, why will it stress you out? What makes it stress you out? What can you do to be less stressed about that duty? I want you to think about that as well. You don't want to bring it up in the interview because you want to think about it, because you don't want to do anything that's going to X you out before they even offer you the job, especially if it's a job that you really want. So I want you to think about what part of that duty that stresses you out. Again, you can think about what accommodation can you swap out. You don't have to say that at the interview at that time. They're interviewing 20 people. They're hiring for one. You don't want to already come in with what you can and can't do, because then you're going to X yourself out. So think about what the job is. What about it makes you stressed out? What can you do to not be stressed out? I'll give a good example for myself. I think I talked about this before. I was hired at a company who had an office cat. I'm afraid of cats. That stresses me out. So I was trying to figure out a way, how would I be able to work there if I'm scared of cats? Because I don't want that cat coming in my office. So I had to think of me, what can I do? Because at the time, back then, working from home was unheard of. So that wasn't even an option. Or I never would even thought about that because that was never even an option. So what could I do to still work there? Although an office cat stresses me out. The thought of that, even now, an office cat would stress me out because I don't like cats like that. So what could I do? I came up with, I'll keep my door closed. And I came up with, hey, Belinda, because you're scared of cats. Hopefully, maybe being around this office cat, you'll be less scared of cats. And maybe so I had to evaluate myself. What can I do to make the situation better? Because if I would have said, I love to work here, but it's me or that office cat. That office cat been there way longer than I have, so it would have been that office cat and not me. So I wasn't going to come in and say all that. And I had to try to figure out a workaround, which I did. I'll see y'all at the next video.